Wait. We're going to turn it over now to Amy Kostelic, our Extension Specialist for Adult Development and Aging.
Great, thanks so much. And maybe should we get a written confirmation from everyone that you can hear us?
Yes, that would be great. Yeah, just let me know that you can see everything and that we're ready to go.
So we'll wait 2 shakes while those get typed in. How about that way we'll know everyone can hear us. We don't have any sound problems or visual problems.
Yes, we're rolling in.
We're rolling in. Okay, as we do that, my understanding is that you can't see me, or Mindy. You can only see the screen, which is great because we've got a lot of great information to give to you today or present to you today on a healthy brain. But as Mindy said, please, if I'm going too fast, type in and tell us to slow down, or if you've got questions, make sure you get those typed in, or I guess we have to type them in. Is that right, Mindy?
Yeah, you can actually unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, or unmute, great, and then get those questions asked so we can address those as they come up. So we'll make this as formal as it is going to be because we're online like this, but we'll make it as informal as possible so that we can answer questions and have discussion along the way. So many of you have probably attended some of the past programs with aging and adult development on the Keys to Embracing Aging. That's been a big program for us over the last couple of years, especially because of the USDA NEFA grant. But this is a section of that program specifically on brain health. And I've given this talk a couple of times. I know some agents have broken it down a couple of times as well. And so this is kind of a brain health plus, a little bit beyond what we do in Keys to Embracing Aging, which is more of the, Aging 101. So let's get started. We're going to take about the next 20 or so minutes and talk about what we need to do or think about with our brains to keep them healthy. So I put this on here first, this first slide, which is, if I were standing in front of you and could see your faces, you would all either be mouthing or saying out loud, I hope, that these are car keys. And that's great. That's a great sign. So I grew up studying aging, actually starting in high school. And it was one of my first college professors in gerontology who did this exact exercise with us and said, although the keys looked a little different back then, by the way, which I kind of laughed about when I pulled this picture for the slides, because I was going to put just old-fashioned keys. And then I thought, if there are enough young people out there, they might not know what those are without a key fob. Isn't that crazy? So the question that was always posed to us was, what are these? And of course, we were all able to say keys. And so then our professor would say, great, your brains are absolutely fine. And I always thought, well, that's a weird question. But the professor would say then, the problem is not if you lose them, because we all misplace things, and some of us misplace things more than others. But the problem is if you're holding on to these keys and you no longer know what they're for. And now you know you have a problem, potentially have a problem with your brain. So car keys have always represented that to me. And there is a little bit of me as I creep up in age as well. And I hold my keys and I think, oh, good, I know what these are still for. So I start this presentation today with these car keys and asking, do you know what they are? And do you know what they're for? And it's not that this is really a test for brain health. It's not. And so I want to also start by saying that, in fact, there are a lot of ways that our healthcare professionals evaluate brain health. And it's important to know that brain health issues are actually difficult to diagnose. So sometimes conditions that are about the brain show up in other places on the body, as weird as that may sound, but and it's partly because we've got this really complex nervous system. And so you may end up with issues, that are, with your muscles or with your sleep or your blood work and all these different things. And so when we do start to look at brain health, a doctor will initially do kind of an initial medical history. And they're going to look at things like, blood tests and some minor neurological exams, and they're going to try to rule out other things that may be going on. And so then if what they see, if these initial exams show any sign of problems with your brain health, then they're going to do a little bit more. And some of those more advanced diagnostics can look at, different types of blood work, biopsies, CT scans, MRIs, neurological exams, and all sorts of different stuff, psychometric exams. Sleep studies are a big one. We're learning more and more and more, and I'm going to talk a lot about sleep today, how sleep and lack of sleep or sleep disruption can lead to so many things, so many different things that we find out about over a sleep study. So anyway, today we're going to concentrate on healthy brains so that we know when these carcasses are in our hands, we can know for a long time what they're supposed to be for. So keys to keeping your brain healthy. We're going to look at the following bullets: healthy numbers and what that means, physical activity, nutrition, avoiding smoking and alcohol, mental stimulation, protecting your head, sleep, socialization, and emotional health. So we're going to start with maintaining your numbers. And again, I said that a lot of this is pulled from the Keys to Embracing Aging program materials, but the bottom line is that a healthy heart equals a healthy brain. And these numbers are ways in which we can check or have double checks to make sure that our heart and our brains are healthy. And so we want to make sure, and the reason why the brain and the heart, if you're not familiar with anatomy, the reason that those are so interconnected and so important to keep healthy together is because we want to keep that blood moving through the blood vessels and up into the brain, because that's what provides the oxygen and the stimulation to the brain. And so it's the heart that does all that. So we need a healthy heart to be able to get everything moving north. And so there is, I think this is just kind of a little side note, and I think a lot of KH members are women. And so there was a Swedish study that I pulled to share, and it talked about how there were over 30,000 women, Swedish women in this study, and they found that those who ate a healthy diet, exercised regularly, didn't smoke, drank only moderately, and kept their body mass index below 25 had a far lower risk of stroke than women who didn't meet any of those 5 goals. So again, when we have lower risks of stroke, we have higher abilities to maintain a healthy brain. And so looking at that, the other way I look at numbers too, which is kind of funny to me because I am not a numbers person for people who know me well, not at all. But numbers do sort of rule our life. There are phone numbers, there are PIN numbers, there are social security numbers, our employee numbers, all these kinds of things. Yet I honestly, even within the profession that I am, couldn't tell you a single one of my health numbers. I do go to the doctor every year and I do listen to what they say, and I always think, oh, I should record those in my phone or record those somewhere so I can keep them. But I don't keep track of these things. And it's one of those goals truly that I have to start doing that. I think part of it for me, in honesty, is I know my numbers are within the normal range, so I don't worry about it so much, so it doesn't really register as much with me, but that shouldn't be an excuse either to not keep up with those like I do the rest of my numbers. So let's just run through these real quick. So with cholesterol, we know that the bad cholesterol is associated with an increased risk of dementia. And again, why would that be? And that's because that means that the blood flow is not going, when your arteries are clogged, the plaque's accumulating, clogging the arteries, and that increases your risk for heart disease and stroke. Like we just said, heart disease and stroke are high risk factors for dementia and other problems with your brain. So we want to keep those, the bad cholesterol down and the good cholesterol up. And so ways in which we can increase the good cholesterol is to add soluble fats and fibers to your diet, maintaining a healthy weight, regular exercise, avoiding smoking and secondhand smoke, and talking to your medical providers, like I just said, about your number and what healthy options are to get your numbers down, because sometimes that's just lifestyle changes, or sometimes that may be medication, depending on your body and your family history. Fasting triglycerides, if you don't know what triglycerides are, they're like cholesterol. They're a form of fat that circulates in the bloodstream. They're responsible for the energy that tissues need to function. And so again, for our tissues to be healthy, we need this level, like cholesterol, to not be too high. And so again, ways in which we can monitor triglycerides are very similar. It's going to be maintaining ideal healthy body weight, avoiding fatty foods, avoiding bad cholesterol, eating more fruits and vegetables, and eating good unsaturated fats. And we'll talk about more about the nutrition. You're going to see that there's a lot of integration between the different keys to brain health. When we look at blood pressure, again, we want to stay lean. We want to exercise regularly, limit your alcohol to at least 2 drinks a day, reduce stress. We want to eat right. Blood pressure, high blood pressure, again, especially in midlife, increases the risk of cognitive decline in old age. And again, it's all about the way in which the blood is being brought to, the way in which the pressure of the blood is moving throughout the body. Fasting blood sugar. Blood sugar or glucose is a type of sugar that travels, again, through the bloodstream. And it's a basic fuel for the body. It's needed for energy and it's needed for proper cell functioning, particularly for brain cells and for muscles. And so we do know that diabetes is a disease that affects over 25, almost 26 million children and adults. If diabetes is left untreated, there's a lot of medical complications, including cardiovascular diseases, kidney diseases, unhealthy cholesterol levels, clogged arteries. And so you can imagine what I'm going to say, that diabetes is a leading risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So again, to maintain healthy blood sugar levels and to help prevent diabetes, the Mayo Clinic in particular recommends exercising regularly, eating plenty of fiber and whole grains, maintaining a healthy weight, skipping bad diets, and making healthy choices. So you're already seeing a trend here on ways in which we need to make some different lifestyle decisions. So those numbers are going to influence just automatically body mass index and waist circumference. So I left those on here, even though you're probably not going to see these numbers as much specific to brain health, but they do make a difference, because if we do all the things that we're supposed to do to maintain our cholesterol, triglycerides, blood pressure, blood sugar, etc., we should be able to maintain our body mass index and our waist circumference as well. And so here's what we know about BMI. So that's a ratio, in case you're not familiar, it's a ratio between height and weight, and it's used to help judge the proper amount or a healthy amount of body fat and weight. So there are a couple of exceptions. If you are an athlete and have an exceptional what do I want to say, like a bodybuilder who has an exceptional muscle mass, the BMI is not going to be as accurate for that person. Women who are pregnant, lactating, and nursing, that also is going to throw that number off a little bit. But basically, there are different weight categories according to the BMI ratios, and we've got the weight categories of underweight, normal, overweight, obese, and extreme obesity. And so those help us indicate the high risks or the risks of severe health problems, again, including heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. And so that's why I kept this in there so that you can see. And so we really want, especially as women, for adult women, for our body mass index to be between 18 and 25, again, depending on your ratio between height and weight. And then there's also been a new connection, not a new, but a more recent connection with body mass index and waist circumference. And so we know that body fat that accumulates around the waist and the stomach, which unfortunately for women gets worse as we age and harder to lose as we age, but that poses a greater risk than the fat stored in the lower half of our body. So as much as we hate our thighs sometimes too, it is that stomach area that we actually need to worry about from a health standpoint. So the measurement of your waist, that waist circumference, like BMI, can predict future health problems, including type 2 diabetes and different cardiovascular diseases, and especially if the BMI is higher than it should be. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Maybe go home tonight and take a tape measure out and kind of look at that. Interestingly, when we've done some of our Keys to Embracing Aging challenges, and in particular when we did the Greece International Study Tour this past spring, we, starting in February, challenged the agents, some of the agents who went on the study tour with us, and we had a couple who lost 30-some pounds just based on thinking about their lifestyle and their choices differently after hearing a talk about, waist circumference and BMI and how that affects these numbers. So, there's sometimes we can make these little goals and they can make a big difference for us. So the next slide then is going to focus on physical activity. This is the next key, and some might say is probably the biggest key to brain health, simply because exercise and being physically active has such an influence on these numbers in particular. And again, like we said, or I said, we know that a healthy heart is related to a healthy brain. And so by exercising and eating properly, and helping maintain that healthy heart, that's a big key to the healthy brain. And then we've got the emotional side of it too, which is coming up. But basically, the gist of physical activity is that it increases blood flow. It's going to help with memory and thinking. It's a huge factor for reducing stress and anxiety. And you can read, what else is on that slide. It improves reaction time. It helps with vocabulary. It helps with learning. it clears your brain, it helps delay Alzheimer's disease. I mean, there's all these positive effects that come with physical activity and exercise. And so here's the kick on exercise, I think. I talk a lot about healthy aging. I talk a lot about these international blue zones and these longevity studies. And the truth is, the majority of the longevity studies, especially longevity studies that have been done in Europe, they are not these people. And a longevity study, by the way, is someone who's, or are studies on people who are living to be 90 plus years old and healthy. And so these folks aren't running marathons necessarily. They're not, working out in triathlons and all these things when you think of exercise. Because at least for me, when I think exercise, I think sweat and my heart rate is up and I'm really getting a good workout. And if I don't do that, it wasn't a good workout and I can't count it as exercise. And that is true. Exercise by definition is a set structured amount of time to engage in physical activity, but it's with the goal to raise your heart rate. Whereas physical activity is more what the longevity studies are going to recommend. And so physical activity is just being active, just moving, walking as much as you can, walking to, the farmer's market if you can, or to a store, not driving around for 10 minutes to find the closest parking spot, just parking and walking into the store. It's, walking your dog, it's just movement, gardening, swimming, whatever it may be. So sometimes in Okinawa, Japan, as an example, you've got these 90, 100 plus year old men in particular who are still going spearfishing for their dinner. And Ikari in Greece, they're walking up and down the mountains to their farms to go gardening and bring it back into their homes. And so we've got to find a balance, because it's easy, and that's what I tell my students too, and that's what we talked about with the extension agents this past spring in Greece. It's easy to go spearfish in Okinawa, Japan, if you live on that island, or to walk up and down the mountains in Greece, because that's where you live on Ikari, this remote little island. But I can't necessarily walk to work in Lexington, Kentucky. One, the roads are dangerous. Mindy's kind of laughing. And in the summer, in all honesty, it's like 100 degrees, and I'm probably not going to want to walk to work that way. Not because I don't like the heat, because I have to be at work the whole day then.
There's no showers here.
Yeah, there aren't any showers that you pay for me to take in Funkhauser. So we have to find a balance on what works for us and who we are and what our lifestyle is. And so we try to keep in mind then what NIH, the National Institute on Health, and the CDC recommend for exercise, and to make these goals for us. And so the recommendation for healthy adults is to be able to have some sort of moderate intensity physical activity for 150 minutes a day. And you can break that down to, or 150 minutes a week, I'm sorry. Mindy's eyes about bugged out of her head.
Stressing out there.
Yeah, 150 minutes a week, which breaks down to about 30 minutes a day. And what they prefer is that you do it at least in 10-minute intervals. So by breaking it down that way to say, how can we get 150 minutes of exercise per week, if that sounds overwhelming to you, if you can start to break it down and not be overwhelmed by the big picture, then 10 minutes, 3 times a day doesn't sound so bad. Mm-hmm. Or you can flip it around too and say, gosh, this goal is to get 10,000 steps a day. Is that doable for me? And I think actually, I meant to look that up and I forgot. I think, aren't we upping that to say we should actually be walking more than 10,000 steps?
What Natalie has said recently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but at least as a minimum, can you walk those 10,000 steps? And it's amazing, because you think, for some people, you might think, whoa, that sounds like a lot. But for others, I have 20-year-old students who aren't doing it. And that's shocking to me as they're crossing UK campus. But I think a lot of Ubers are taken and things like that. So 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, or 75 minutes of vigorous, intense exercise or physical activity is the recommendation. It's also recommended that you include strength training. And so there's also studies that demonstrate that regardless of your age, they did a study on women who were 90 and demonstrated that they were able to increase their muscle mass at the age of 90 years old by doing strength training. But pretty amazing.
So you don't lose it if you don't use it.
That's right. So you don't lose it. Okay, so next it seems in order that we would talk about nutrition. And again, I've kind of beat this up, I think, but again, a heart healthy diet is a brain healthy diet. And so one way to think about what kind of foods do I eat is the Mediterranean diet, which is easy to think about, I think, this day and age, because it's such a trendy diet that people are eating. And so when you think Mediterranean, you're going to think olive oils, beans, and legumes, fish, vegetables, and fruits. And so if you can maintain a diet like that, there was someone on the Today Show actually this morning that talked about, she was an addict actually, and when she stopped drinking and doing drugs, she turned to food, although she battled food before that too. And then one day she just realized, I can't live a life like this. And so when she got off drugs and alcohol, she turned to food for one last time, and then realized that she has to turn around the way in which she eats as well. So she cut out flour, she cut out sugar, she cut out all alcohol from her addiction days, measures all her food so she knows how much to eat. But the reason I'm sharing this is, one, I saw it this morning, but two, it resonated with me because as a runner, that is sometimes how I approach like marathon training. When you think about how do I train to run 26.1 miles, that's a long distance. But when you break it down for the training and you look at your calendar and you've got it all laid out in front of you, that says on this Monday, I'm going to run this distance. On Tuesday, I've got to run this distance, and so on. And you're just starting to cross those off. It just becomes part of what your habitual routine is. And so this woman on the show this morning was saying that same thing. Basically, it's not a big deal for me to weigh my food or to look at my proportions like this, because it just has become my habitual routine, just as if I were to go to the gym and do whatever my training would be. And I thought, that's a smart way to look at that, I think. And for her, and that way of thinking, it was really helpful. So again, we want to look at, those healthy kind of foods, that Mediterranean diet. And the reason for that is because, again, a brain healthy diet is one that is going to protect your heart and vice versa. And basically, it's going to encourage that good blood flow to the brain, and good diets are also going to help fight diabetes as well. So again, another big risk factor. Foods that are high in antioxidants. Antioxidants, if you're not familiar, they're like a compound that inhibit oxidation, which is a chemical reaction that produces what we call these free radicals. And free radicals then are in your system, and they're attacking, and they set up this chain of reactions that can cause cell damage. Basically, they attack cells. So these antioxidants, or foods that are rich in antioxidants, help, there are going to be substances then within those foods, or nutrients within the food, that helps protect the cells from these free radicals. So that's why we want these antioxidant foods in our system, or nutrients in our system, just to kind of make it a little bit more generalized, because I think sometimes it gets a little intimidating when you're like, what is food high? What do antioxidants mean, or what do they even do? Who cares? And so the superfood that are highly associated with antioxidants are blueberries in particular, and other types of berries, but also cranberries, oranges, grapes, strawberries, avocados. Really think, again, vegetables, think fruits. Those are going to be foods that have some potent antioxidants to consider. Powering up with omega-3s are also important. Omega-3s are fatty acids that the body needs to properly function, but the body does not make omega-3 fatty acids. So the best way to get that is through food sources. So example foods of high food in omega-3 include salmon, tuna, different kind of fishes like mackerel and trout, sardines. My students are not a fan of eating sardines when we're in Greece, but they're good sports about trying it. And I always keep telling them when they're doing it and trying it, I'm like, think how happy your brain is when you're eating this. They would rather stick to nuts, walnuts, pecans, almonds. And then you can also think leafy greens, the dark leafy green vegetables as well. Flax, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, eggs are also high in omega-3. But the other thing too that this is sort of, again, basic math. This is becoming a math lesson to me. But don't ingest as much, we've got to find the right balance between how many calories we're taking in and how many calories we're burning. So if you're running marathons and swimming in the ocean and all these things, you're going to be able to take in more calories. But if you're not doing that and you lead a more sedentary lifestyle, then you're probably going to have to, cool down on some of the intake that you have. I think this is just an extra slide that I left in there because we've already talked about all this stuff, although I'll just reiterate too, or I didn't say this, so I will say drinking water and controlling your portions are also important keys to that healthy eating. So this is just a quick reminder to avoid tobacco and alcohol. I know we've heard this, but the reason I put it on a slide is because there's some contradicting information that you may think is out there, and that is, and I already said it once, to drink in moderation. That study of the 30,000 women in Sweden said that they drank moderately. And in truth, the Mediterranean diet, if you look at a Mediterranean diet pyramid, it actually includes alcohol on it. And so there are some benefits to drinking alcohol, but it is not drinking alcohol in excess. It's not binge drinking alcohol. And so that can go a couple different ways, and this is why I wanted to bring it up. So for men, they recommend 1 to 2 drinks a day, and that can be beer or wine in particular. And for women, it's 1 drink. But again, the idea is that you might do that daily if that's your choice. But the idea is not, I didn't drink all week long, so I have 7 days of drinking that I can make up for on a weekend. Or I didn't drink for 2 weeks straight, so now I have 2 weeks worth of drinks that I can drink on this weekend, because that's binge drinking, and that is not what that means. There's not a healthy benefit involved at all with binge drinking. But the bottom line is to avoid tobacco in all forms and to avoid excessive drinking. So then we look at mental stimulation, and I like to talk about mental stimulation because I think a lot of people think, yeah, you know, I'm really good at this. I do the crossword puzzles, and if any of you have heard me talk before, you may have heard me say, yeah, word finds are really fun. I just did one, you know, at a restaurant the other day in like the kids' book when I was waiting with my niece and nephews, and it was really easy. However, that really didn't challenge my brain. So I always say it's not the giant word finds, it's not the kid crossword puzzles that you need to do, it's the New York Times that you need to be doing. These are ways in which you challenge your brain to make your brain work. You're thinking about like my first slide that I had, the little brain with the weight. You know, you've got to, I don't want to say stress your brain in a bad way, but if you're thinking about exercise, exercise shouldn't be easy, right? I just got done saying how you're increasing your heart rate, you're sweating, you know, that was my purpose to do that. So mental stimulation needs to be very similar to that. So there's games and puzzles, sure, but they need to be, you know, at a level that challenges you. Reading and writing are great ways to stimulate the brain. Education and lifelong learning. We know we have a connection or an association with the longer or the higher education that you have, the better that is to protect yourself from Alzheimer's disease. Different hobbies, creating new hobbies, having emotional, psychological, spiritual engagement is also a way to engage the brain and stimulate mental health. And some of that too can be, some of that stimulation can just be, you know, walking in nature, yoga, meditation, being in the now, being in the present, being exposed to new environments, traveling, things like that. I used this, the answers are there. Sometimes I don't know what happened with this presentation, but I'm not able to, like the animation stuff is all missing on it. But so here's an example of a puzzle. And again, this is in our Keys to Embracing Aging exercise too, but you can see it's a little bit more challenging. When it was first presented to me by the folks at Kansas State, I just didn't get it. I don't know what to do. But it's hard to see because it's filled in. But basically when you get this puzzle, all you see is taste and service. And so you look at, I'm trying to point to my screen and I realize you guys don't see me, but you're using I'm
pointing for you.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Mindy's got a pointer on it, she said. So when you look at number 1, the clue is, it is yummy. And so the number 1 line would say taste, and then it was blank. But whatever goes in blank, the second blank on line 1 has to be the same word as you can see that goes on line 2. So then you've got to look ahead and look at the number 2 clue, a marksman's asset. Is that kind of connecting with you? Is it making sense? Again, it's hard if it was blank and I could put the words up one at a time. But these are the kind of puzzles that we want people to be doing because it makes you think about things, and it's hard. They're just hard to do. All right, this is another simple one, straightforward. Even undiagnosed concussions increase the risk of cognitive impairment. And so regardless of what you're doing, you need to be wearing a seatbelt. You need to not have your legs up on your dashboard when you're driving because of airbags. You need to be wearing a helmet when you're on a bike. All those kinds of things that you think about. I think, and the reason, again, this slide went into this particular presentation too, is because we hear a lot about concussions, and I think we automatically associate it with football and sports, and we don't think it really happens to us. And I'm guilty of this too. I mean, when I go to the state park up in northern Wisconsin and we rent bikes, I've got my little basket on the bike and I rarely wear a helmet. Whereas when I'm on the road, on a road bike and biking with my husband, I always have a helmet on. But what's the difference? I could still hit a tree either way, or someone can hit me. And we don't think about that as much. And so again, it's really looking at ways in which, what are we doing and how do we protect our heads? And again, falls are another one. 1 in 3 adults 65 and older are at fall and are at risk of falling. And so we may fall, we may hit our head. I just fell over the Christmas break, it was a fall walking down this cliff, but the point is I still fell and I did hit my head, and I really didn't even think about that. But was that an undiagnosed concussion? I don't know. It could have been. I mean, I hit my head pretty hard that day. So things like that we've got to think about. All right, sleep. This is one I really shouldn't be talking about myself because I do not get enough sleep. I have gone to a neurologist about this. I know I have chronic sleep deprivation, and it's something that I need to continue to work on. So I'm going to preach it, and I also need to remind myself to practice this as well. But I think me personally, and a lot of other people are guilty, that when you're trying to buy time in a day, typically we say, we'll just stay up later, we'll get up earlier to get something done. And now we know that is really not good for us. We've got to either balance and budget our time better, but that sleep is not the one thing that we should give to find time or to buy time. So what we know about sleep is that it clears away toxins, it repairs daily wear and tear, it makes order from chaos in our brains, it helps create memories. And then the lack of sleep, of course, is going to affect things like memory, mood, concentration, coordination, the ability to learn. It's a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and other psychiatric and neurological disorders. It's also a safety issue. There have been studies that look at is sleep-deprived driving as dangerous as driving while impaired by alcohol, and it is. A neurologist has recently been quoted to say sleep is the most important thing you can do to reset the brain, to allow it to heal and allow it to restore mental health. And I think when you look at it or think about it in those words, it becomes a little bit more powerful, that sleep is your body's time to really reset the brain. And we need about 7 to 9 hours to do that. Now, again, sleep is a little bit different based on everyone's individual circadian rhythms and that sort of thing. But in the ideal world, we need a set amount of time to be able to reset that brain. And so some of the ways in which they look at that too, and some tidbits that they give to people, is this, exercising, eating well is going to help with sleep, setting regular bedtimes and waking hours, getting up and out of bed if you're not falling asleep after the first 20 minutes, avoiding reading, watching television. There's new research on phones because people are reading from their phones a lot when they go to bed, but to actually disconnect from your phone and that, what do they call it, like the blues of green or whatever that is, even though I think phones can switch that now, but they're just saying don't take your phone to bed and put your phone away 30 to 60 minutes prior to your bedtime. They're also saying, this slide shows keep a sleep journal, but there's also research on saying, can you do a brain dump before you go to bed? And that is with all the anxiety that you have or stresses or whatever it may be that's floating around in your brain, can you dump that into a journal of some kind or just on a piece of paper to let it go, just to separate yourself from it and make a conscious effort to do so before you fall asleep, because they're finding that so many people's brains continue to race even in their sleep about their worries, their thoughts, their concerns, their stresses. And so it's a way to have that kind of mindfulness before you go to sleep, just to help calm your brain, to help create healthy or more calm, restful sleep. And so I believe this is the last key, or at least second to the last key, and that is socialization. And so again, if you've heard me talk, you've heard me say a million times that we now know that meaningful social connection is as important, some studies would say, as physical activity and nutrition. And that is because we are social animals. We are meant to be with other people. We are not meant to be in isolation. And it's interesting. I was just talking to someone on the mental health initiative here at UK, and they're reading the book, a communal reading called iGen, like iPhone, iPads and stuff, Gen for standing for generation. And I've not yet read the book, but it's talking about how iGen has grown up, or part of what's in the book is talking about how the young generations now have grown up much more isolated than any other generations, and how that is becoming an increasing problem and challenge for them, because that's what their normal is, because of the way in which they're tuned and connected to technology and through technology. And so there's a movement right now, even at universities, to have 101 or gen ed classes, and I don't know if your kid's doing it yet or not, to be honest, but it's classes on how to make friends. Because people don't know or don't have that skill set. And that's scary, especially when I, hear that from the standpoint of being a gerontologist, because what we do in this talk isn't about what we do with our brains at 65 and older. This is about brain health through the lifespan. And so if we've got kids who are, already have that kind of going against them, that they don't have these meaningful social connections and relationships, that's not a good thing. And we've got to, really think about that. And so the importance of keeping in touch with friends, friends and friends. I think that should have been friends and family. Staying engaged, staying involved. And again, this is also a way to mentally stimulate your brain as well, getting to know your neighbors and just being plugged into the world. So there's a balance. I'm not at all against technology, because there's a balance. And for some people, that helps people stay engaged in a world. That helps people stay connected to friends and family. But it's about, having quality over quantity is how I look at it and talk about it with my students. You can have 4,000 Facebook friends or Instagram friends or whatever, and that's great. But at least hopefully 4 of them are really awesome and really close, and someone you're going to be able to call, if you need to. And then lastly, this is the last one I've got, and we'll open it up for any questions that you may have. But the key of brain health really too is the overall emotional health and wellness. And so that's going to entail good mental health, having the ability to have some mindful meditation, being in the moment. Really, honestly, I look at this and think, what's emotional wellness? I think part of that this day and age is being able to stop and smell the roses and just appreciate yourself and your family and your friends and those who are around you, being able to manage your stress and just being overall in a good place. I think is to me what emotional kind of helps define emotional wellness. So that is brain health in a nutshell. I hope you found that helpful. I hope you learned something new. Are there any questions that you may have for me?
Remember, you can unmute yourself or you can type in.
Maybe you're all too busy having discussion in your meeting.
I have a question.
What you're gonna
Great. What's your question?
Okay. Is there a website that you could get some of the, like the word game that you showed and some Sudokus, or, that is available for brain health?
Yeah, actually, I can forward them or have Mindy forward them to everybody. But if you even just Google brain health, just a Google search, you'll see all sorts of stuff online, neurobics, brain exercises, and in some, depending on where you are, there's even some cities that have brain gyms. So where people actually go and get on computers and just do like puzzles, like I just showed you as an example, and you just sit there with other people and work on them. But if you Google it, like I said, you'll be able to find things, some hit words that you'll see when you type in brain health or brain exercise. Neurobics will be a big one. Brain exercise, brain strengthening, brain games. You'll see.
I think of the library as being a brain gym.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
mental gymnastics pops up when you put
Oh,
in.
mental, yeah, somebody said mental gymnastics is another one that will pop up. I haven't heard that one. But yeah, the library is a brain gym. You're right. And I don't think that people go to the library as often as they used to either.
I've tried to challenge myself to read things that aren't just for fun,
Mm-hmm.
but they're actually stimulating my thought processes and
Yeah.
not just feel good stuff.
You know, even you can turn brain exercise too into like family night. You know, it just hit me. My stepson gave to me this game. I honestly can't even tell you what it's called. I can't remember, which is sort of funny, right? But it was this game he gave me for Christmas because he knows I love games and I love when the family plays games together. And this game was so hard. You had to build, the concept of it was you had to build a house or build this room, and then to it's hard to explain, but you draw cards and you had characters and I mean, actually it was kind of brutal. People were trying to kill each other and all these different things were going on. But the whole point is I didn't really think about it until just now with the library being a brain gym that, I mean, that was making us think outside the box too,
Right.
because this was a game that was different than what we'd usually play. You know, we play games and again, it becomes part of our habitual routine. So we all know how to play Taboo or Categories or Pictionary or, you know, all those kind of games. But really when we're sitting there and playing a game like Trivia Pursuit, although I don't know that families play that old game anymore, but similar games to that, Cranium, or, you know, those are ways too that you're challenging your brain. Learning a new game like this that had a lot of strategy and
So that's what I was going to
details.
think about, like Trivial Pursuit. That's stuff that we have stored in our brain and it comes out. But it sounds like to me that what you're talking about exercises the brain more than something
Yeah,
that
so
we're
that's interesting too. So Mindy has a good point. Like if you're just doing random memorization and recall, is that a way to stimulate the brain? So yes and no, because recall is a way to practice things, you know, like we would in exercise too, right? It's repetition. And so recall in that way can be important. But yeah, to actually stimulate, to create new connections between the synapses in the brain, that is going to be learning new information and absorbing new information versus assimilating old. But both are still important. And actually when you're young, when you're, you know, that's how we first start learning. It's this whole process called assimilation and, I just lost it. I just had it. Assimilation and, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry. I totally lost the other word. It sounds really similar to assimilation, but it's basically, and basically like adaptation. So you're either assimilating information you already had, or you're bringing in new information to it. And that's how your brain learns things. Accommodation.
Accommodation.
I could not think of it. Accommodation. Blah, blah.
Is there anybody who has a question that can't speak? If you want to type, we can do that as well. If everybody's finished, if you'll just type thank you or say goodbye or something so that we know we're done. That will help us. Okay, I think we're wrapping it up. Okay, so I'm going to shut down the record. I will have, as I said, I do have it on record so that it will be available, and I can just upload it to your YouTube channel, and then you all will be able to have that. They have their own YouTube channel in Green River area.
Great.
So you all can access that as you need it. So thank you all so much.